May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, the one who gives us strength and the one who does redeem us. Amen. Today is annual meeting, and I know that's why you all are here, correct? It's part of our church law, our canonical law. We have to gather at least once a year as a congregation to do some things called electing a vestry, those lay leaders who share in ministry with the rector and clergy in carrying out our ministry, our goals and visions for this parish, who share in leadership doing this. Another practical thing we will do at the annual meeting is to approve a budget for 2019. Also a canonical requirement for us this day. And so I want to talk a bit about our 2019 budget, but in a very different way. Let me digress for one moment. Some of you may wonder what that very fancy title of mine is that you see printed in the bulletin, the Very Reverend. It's quite presumptuous and arrogant, is it not? It's not a title I asked for, but it's a title that we have borrowed from the Church of England. A dean is simply a clergy person in a certain region who represents the bishop for the bishop's goals and desires, or the diocese's goals and desires. So I happen to be one of 15 deans in the diocese, and I represent what is known as South Fairfax. So I represent Bishop Goff on her behalf at clergy meetings or in meetings of lay leaders in this region. So over the years, I've almost 3 years doing this, a couple of years, I've grown to know a lot of vestry members, not only in our region, but across the diocese. And by the way, they have many of the same questions that our vestry members and that you have about the church. On one particular occasion, a couple of vestry members who I could see, were mentally wringing their hands. I could almost see it. Tim, what do we do to grow the church? Our numbers are declining. We need to grow. It's a question or a desire you've heard in many different places, I'm sure. And they kept getting back to that question. Give us an answer of how to grow, as if I had the magic pill to give churches to grow. So I asked them, why do you want to grow? It's not a trick question or a facetious question, I told them immediately, but why do you want to grow? And this was the answer I got. Because we need to fund our budget. Because we need to fund our budget. That's the reason we need to grow. And I said, that's probably true. You do need people to give more money to help support the budget. That is true, but I said, I would suggest to you to think about the church and church growth in a different way. And I said, I believe the purpose of the church is to equip and support people to be disciples of Jesus Christ. The room went eerily silent with that. Oh, but Tim, we just need to keep our activities and programs going. We need to, because that's what our budget's for, to fund programs and activities. I think there are times where it's important to get back to the basics and to the essentials. And I believe that's what annual meetings can make possible. for us to get back to the basics and essentials. Paul wrote to a church in Corinth in need of those reminders of the basics and essentials. The church in Corinth, if you know reading that letter, that church was in discord. People were arguing with one another. Who was better? Who was more spiritual than the next person? It would have been interesting to be at one of their annual meetings. Vote for this vestry person because they're way more spiritual than candidate B. That was the type of thing going on in Corinth. So Paul wrote to them. In shorthand, he wrote to them to say, cut that out. You remember last week we read from that well-known chapter in this letter, love is patient, love is kind. You all know that one. Some of you may know that by heart. Some of you may have had that read at your wedding, or you hear it at weddings a lot. The irony is that part, again, it's written to a church in discord, which may make it a good thing to be read at weddings. And so Paul continues. He says, I want to remind you why you are a church. I want to remind you why you are here. And he's saying this, I believe, to us this morning. Why are we here? And what is the purpose of St. Andrews? I believe the purpose of St. Andrews is far more than activities, parties, and events. Our purpose is far more than just more activities to add to our already busy and schizophrenic lives. The purpose of a church is to proclaim the love of God in Jesus Christ to a world that is desperate. To proclaim the love of God in Jesus to a world that needs peace, to a world that is deeply divided, to a world that needs reconciliation one to another. That is what we are about. We proclaim the good news of God in Jesus Christ, and a lot of that you will never see in the numbers of a budget. For instance, right now, you literally cannot see Christy Dasher teaching godly play to our children, reminding them yet again of what Scripture says about God's love for us, and particularly God's love made known in Jesus. You will not be able to see our teachers down the hallway during Sunday school hour teaching older children that same thing. On Sundays, when Margaret or I send out Eucharistic visitors to go and not only take communion to our shut-ins, but also to pray with them, you can't see that. That never shows up in a budget. But that is proclaiming God's love in Jesus Christ to people who are desperate for community, for peace, and for reconciliation. That is our purpose. So while, yes, we have to approve the 2019 budget, hopefully, and I do believe it's the case, that budget represents our commitment to shared ministry. That's what it's about. Speaking of reconciliation, I'm not sure Paul would have been the first choice to go out to the churches and talk about reconciliation. Paul did not have exactly the best bio or LinkedIn profile to choose him. If you remember, Paul was antagonistic against those first disciples of Jesus. And not only that, he went out and beat them up. And because of an encounter he has with Jesus Christ, his life changes. But Paul says right here, I'm the least one qualified to be an apostle. And yet I proclaim, I remind you, brothers and sisters, of the good news found in Jesus Christ. So churches are places for those who are unfit. All of us. You've probably heard through the years what I hear all the time. Organized religion and churches are nothing more than crutches for people. To which I respond, absolutely right. Because we all are in need of a physician. At the end of the day, we all are in need of healing, peace, hope, and being reconciled one to another. We do need a community like this for us all to be healed and made whole. We are not all put together. We are all unfit. There are places all the world over where people admit they are unfit, and they are called AA meetings. One of my favorite writers, Frederick Buechner, one of his books took everyday words and put a theological spin on them, took everyday words and put God language in them. And in one of his books, he writes about AA. And this is what he writes about AA. Their purpose in coming together is to give it up and to help others do the same. They realize they can't pull this off by themselves, and they need others. They believe they need God. The ones who aren't so sure about God refer to their higher power. When they first start talking at a meeting, they introduce themselves by saying, "Hi, I'm John, I'm an alcoholic," or "Hi, I'm Mary, I'm an alcoholic." To which, at each introduction, they reply in unison, "Hi, John, hi, Mary." They're apt to end their meeting with the Lord's Prayer or the Serenity Prayer. And apart from that, they have no ritual, they have no hierarchy, they have no budget. They do not advertise or proselytize. They have no buildings of their own. Nobody lectures them, and they do not lecture each other. They simply tell their own stories with the candor that anonymity makes possible, in the hope that they find healing. They tell where they went wrong and how day by day they are trying to get it right. Buechner goes on with this. You can't help thinking that something like this is what the church is meant to be. And maybe once before it got to be big business. Sinners Anonymous, Buechner suggests the church should be called. I'm Tim, I'm a sinner. Hi, every Sadie and Sal. Hi, every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It is the forgiveness of sins, of course. It's what the church is all about. Would it ever occur to Christians in a far-off place to turn to a church nearby in hope of finding forgiveness of sins? Would it ever occur to Christians to come to St. Andrews in Burke, Virginia, in hope of finding peace, reconciliation, hope, forgiveness? This is the purpose of St. Andrews. This is the purpose of St. Andrews. In just a bit, we will leave this nave for a while. We will process into the parish hall, and we will have, yes, a church meeting. We have to, or I would hear from Bishop Goff. But I hope we also remember why we are gathering, why we are electing lay leaders to help me and Margaret and the staff with the shared ministry we all take part in. I hope we remember that. And I hope we remember our purpose is to reveal the love of God made visible in Jesus Christ. And to reveal the love of God in Jesus, revealed when we meet homeless strangers and provide them a place to spend the night in food. That is the love of God in Jesus revealed to a world in desperate need. This is our purpose. And if you look at annual meetings as something like an anniversary, happy anniversary, St. Andrews.